Good evening to everyone in the gallery, to staff and councillors, and welcome to tonight's Ordinary Council meeting on the 11th of December 2024, and I declare this meeting open at 6 p.m. So again, welcome to those present, and thank you for taking the time to come in tonight. And we'd just like to begin with our welcome, which is the City of Swan acknowledges the traditional custodians of this region, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and their continuing connection to the land, waters and community. And we pay our respects to elders past and present and their descendants. So this is the last Ordinary Council meeting for this year, for 2024, and I'll just begin with a disclaimer. The terms and conditions of entry into this meeting are posted on the door as you enter. Please ensure that you've read them prior to attending this meeting and abide by them. Tonight's attendance and apologies. We have all council members in attendance except for Councillor Brodovnik, and we have Councillor Dawn, who is joining us online electronically. Councillor Dawn, do you declare that you can meet the confidentiality regulations?
Yes, definitely.
Thank you. And we'll move on to part 4. We have no leave of absence at this stage and no apologies. Declarations of financial and proximity interests and interests affecting impartiality. We have the following declarations. Deputy Mayor Johnson declared an impartiality interest in item 14.3.5, which is the Responsible Authority Report, Proposed Childcare Premises Lot 33, Number 9, and Lot 34, Number 7, Fauntleroy Street, Guildford, DA 679/24, as he lives in an adjacent street. We have Councillor Bowman, who has declared an impartiality interest in item 14.3.4, which is the proposed amendment number 9 to the Vines Outline Development Plan number 37, ODP 37/G, as he is a past chair of the VRRA, and Councillor Bowman also declared an apprehended bias as he is a long-term resident of the Vines, having been invited to the opening of the Vines approximately 36 years ago. And Councillor Bowman, you'd like to speak to that?
Madam Mayor, I just think it's important I actually explain that reasoning, because we don't see it much in local government, and especially for the people here of the Vines. Madam Mayor, I like to quote Dane versus Peppermint Grove, where there was an issue there where a councillor voted on an item, and I believe it went through 7-0 or 9-0, and the applicant actually challenged that on apprehended bias. Madam Mayor, when I look at apprehended bias, I struggled with this. But Madam Mayor, when I look at this item, having been at the Vines opening 36 years ago, having done work experience at the Vines as a chef, when they had 3 restaurants and you had to dress up, having watched the Vines have magnificent golf tournaments, and then watching the demise of the Vines, I came to the conclusion it was best that I declare an apprehended bias and leave it to my fellow councillors to make that decision, because I did not want to risk the applicant having any reason to challenge this. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. We have Mr Stephen Kane, the CEO, declared an impartiality interest in item 14.1.3, Policy Review, Attendance at Events, Councillors and CEO, as the item deals with the policy provision relating to the CEO. We also have Mr Leon van der Linde, declared an impartiality interest in item 14.3.4, which is the proposed amendment number 9 to the Vines Outline Development Plan number 37, ODP 37G, as he plays golf on a casual basis at the Vines.
2 more.
And I have 2 more here.
2 for Councillor.
I have a disclosure of interest from Councillor Henderson for item 14.3.3, which is proposed amendment 191, telecommunications infrastructure. And it's an impartiality. It says, I am a candidate for the seat of Swan Hills. And also item 14.3.4, proposed amendment number 9, the Vines, and it states, I am a candidate for the seat of Swan Hills. So thank you for that one. And then I also have a disclosure of interest form from Deputy Mayor Ian Johnson, item number 14.1.4. The heading is Bushfire Brigade Local Law, Impartiality, and the reason is Deputy Mayor Johnson is a volunteer firefighter with a DFS Brigade. Now, if there are any others, could councillors please hand them up to the CEO? Thank you. Now we move on to public question time. So questions and answers recorded in the minutes of the meeting may be summarised in accordance with the Local Government Administration Regulations of 1996. All questions received for this meeting have been answered and responded to and have been included in this schedule. All questions will be published in the minutes of this meeting. So 5.1, answers to questions which were taken on notice. There were no questions taken on notice. 5.2, questions relating to reports contained in the agenda. And 5.2.1, questions of which due notice has been given. We have received questions from Mr Dixon Lowe from the Vines Residents and Ratepayers Association, the Honourable Gavin Troy, Mr Robert Bradbury and Dr Judy Finlay, and they are relating to the item 14.3.4, which is the proposed amendment number 9 to the Vines Outline Development Plan, number 37, ODP 37G. And all questions have been answered and they will form part of the minutes. We move to 5.2.2, and this is questions without due notice for items that are in the agenda only. We've had questions from Ms Karen Mowat. They have been answered and they will form part of the minutes also. We've had Mr Dixon Lowe and Mr Robert Bradbury and Mr Mark Church also registered to ask questions, and we'll ask them to come to the podium one at a time. So, thank you. If you'd just like to state your name and the suburb you're from.
I'm Dixon Lowe, representing the VRRA, and I live in the Vines. Proceed. Firstly, thank you for this opportunity. The decision that Council will make this evening is very significant, and I'll ask your forbearance because I'm going to be asking some rather technical questions, but we feel that these are important to fulfill our responsibility of recording the right perspectives of many things. As far as possible, I will be asking questions which I expect just a yes or no answer. Otherwise, I'll try and indicate otherwise. So it's almost an apology, but I will do my best to get through these as quickly as possible. I'm going to refer to a number of other documents. I refer first of all to the notice of, questions with notice, which was on the preceding part of the agenda. And I'll ask questions around that, and then I will ask you to please have a look at the planning report. I'll refer to pages there. So in the first instance, question 1. I expect that the VRRA submission has already been sent to the proponents, and I ask the following questions. Did the planning officers make the VRRA submission available to public for reading?
Through you, Mr Vanderlyn.
Madam Mayor, I'll refer these questions to Mr. Russell, who was the author of the report and did the technical administration of the application.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, I thank the VRRA for some of the questions that Mr Dixon has circulated in advance, and we also have some questions, I believe, that have been supplied by Mr Troy. Given we appreciate the keen interest the VRRA has in relation to this matter, and I propose for the sake of precision and a written record to take all questions on notice and supply a written response to the VRRA and Mr Troy and any others that have supplied their questions in writing in due course. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Did you have a further question?
Sorry, I was expecting a yes or no answer. I'll
Mr.
continue.
Russell's. Thank you.
I will continue. Was the VRA submission or any part thereof made available at any time to government agencies?
Through you, Mr Russell.
Madam Mayor, I stand by my previous response. I intend to take all these questions on notice and supply a formal written response to the VRRA in due course.
Okay. Third question.
Third question, please could you confirm that the councillors were sent the VRRA submission on the 4th of December in time for their meeting, on that day in time for their meeting?
Through you, Mr Russell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll answer this question simply because it's a matter of easy fact that the councillors can answer. Yes, the response was provided to councillors on the 4th of December.
Thank you. I raise those questions so we can see the relative attention. Thank you. Question 2. I refer to the question with notice, item 3, and I would like to please get an answer. We have noted the answer given, and just for a context, the issue here is that the tower footprint is 52 or 56 square metres, and the subject land is declared as a whole lot of 157 hectares, whereas for our application, on at least the Amendment 9 application, the declared area is 6.57 hectares. So we asked about that difference and we got an answer. But however, could we please confirm that all government agencies were only requested to comment on the 6.57 hectare scope?
Through you, Mr van der Linde.
Madam Mayor, I think it's quite clear that these questions are quite technical and it becomes more technical later on. And it will be appropriate for us to go back into the detail and answer them and make sure we give the correct answers with that information then being available when the report goes or when the Commission considers this structure plan. That information will be available at that time. But in short, the agencies were requested to comment on the application. The application is about a modification to a structure plan that impacts a component of the area covered by the structure plan, not all of it.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, sorry, I was really looking for a yes or no answer. I'd like to refer to the actual report, which indicates that the area is 6.57 hectares, which is the point of my question. In the same vein, may I ask, was the independent environmental review conducted on this limited scope of 6.57 hectares?
Through you, Mr van der Linde.
Madam Mayor, my answer to the previous question applied to this as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. That was 5 questions from Mr Lowe. I'll ask Mr Robert Bradbury if he would like to come to the podium.
Good evening. These are hopefully yes-no questions. I think they're quite simple. The Planning Department's statement that no such route sites were recorded near the project in the 2019 Great Cocky count is untrue. This statement was made despite proof having been supplied by the VRA and by birdlife.org, the Cockatoo Count's author, and from the actual person who undertook the census in 2019. Does the Planning Department now acknowledge that this information was incorrect?
Through you, Mr van der Linde.
Madam Mayor, again, we will have to go through the details of that and respond and respond. So these questions, as Mr. Dixon indicated, Mr. Lowe indicated at the start, is very technical of nature, and it requires detailed investigation to answer the questions to be accurate. And on that basis, we'll take these questions on notice so that we have the proper responses available when a report is submitted to the Commission. When they consider the structure plan application, these responses will then be available for them to see as well.
Thank you very much. Do you have a second question?
Madam Mayor, can I just make a point that the information that the question was based upon was supplied in written responses in the deposition, and to avoid answering this question I consider to be personally unacceptable. It's a clear factual question.
Okay. Did you have a second question?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Given that that information is demonstrably incorrect, Was this information supplied to other government departments who were responsible for assessing the application without correction? Sorry, I'm not expecting an answer.
Okay. I'll ask them to respond. Through you, Mr van der Linde.
Madam Mayor, I don't know the answer to that. Phil Russell have dealt with that component, but again, let us do the right thing and answer these questions 100% correctly by taking it on notice and give those answers later.
Thank you. Did you have a third question?
I've only asked, okay, that was, let me just correct that. Irrespective of the council decision tonight, we ask that the council instruct the officers to put a corrected report out to the WAPC. The council has been presented with multiple instances of planning department bias in favour of the developers, the repeating of known untruths, the ignoring...
I just need to halt there just a moment and ask you if you actually have a question.
Yes, there is. I'm simply trying to put the context together for a fairly significant request of the council,
Yeah,
if you
just
indulge
need
me.
to see if you can mould that into a question, please.
Of course. Given the failure to follow the council's strategic directives and the information provided selectively, will the council open an investigation into the advice being provided by the planning department to the council and to its residents, as these responses risk bringing the City of Swan into disrepute with other government bodies and its residents?
I'll ask Mr. Russell, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As Mr van der Linde and myself have both stated, we will respectfully provide, for the sake of accuracy and a record, the VRRA series of an answer to their series of questions. Let me just simply make a statement, Madam Mayor. I can 100% vouch for the veracity of the report prepared by the administration that is in front of the councillors. And obviously, the veracity of that report has been impugned by the nature of the questions, and I think it is of a matter of some gravity that properly should be responded to formally in writing, and assuredly we will do so, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Okay, I'll ask Mr. Mark Church if he would like to come to the podium.
Mark Church, resident of the Vines. Respecting what Mr. Russell and Mr. van der Linde have said, I'll still ask the question. Before moving on to the subject of character and amenity, still on page 155, I ask that, do the planning staff realise they have already dismantled the 6-point reference made by the proponent to the Perth and Peel 3.5 planning framework in concluding the following? So yes or no? I understand you won't be answering.
Okay.
I quote the planning staff's
If you'd
conclusion.
just like me to ask staff to respond, then I'll give them the opportunity. Through you, Mr. van der Linde, or through you, Mr. Russell, thanks.
Take it on notice, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
I quote the planning staff's conclusion that the planning framework document did not encompass the issue of infill development within the Vines. See the end of the third paragraph. And further, this is reinforced by planning framework is a high-level strategic document that does not provide any expressly stated support for or against a proposal at this level. These statements remove the main planning justification of the proponent's application. The VRA and community are delighted with this admission. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, now I have other questions to items not contained in the agenda. 5.3.1, questions of which due notice has been given. We have received questions from Ms. Janzek and they have been answered and they will also form part of the minutes. And now we move to 5.3.2, which is questions given without due notice. Yes.
I believe my name was nominated to ask questions in relation to matters before the agenda.
I'll just check with the minutes clerk as well. Do we have a registration at all for Mr. Troy? No.
I think it was included with Mr. Lowe's document.
Is that through email or via phone call to register?
I'm sorry?
Did you make a request to speak and ask
I
questions?
understand it was included with Mr Lowe's request.
I'm not aware of anything at this stage.
I was just going to ask, this is public question time, isn't it? So are we going to allow him to ask questions?
Through you, Mr CEO.
Thank you. This section of public question time required people to register specifically for the questions. Those registrations were undertaken for the three persons mentioned, Mr Dixon Lowe, Mr Robert Bradbury and Mr Mark Church. That's the provision allowed for in this part of the standing orders.
Okay.
Through you, Madam Mayor, can we move that he be heard?
I'll second that.
Madam, sorry.
Just one moment, please. It's not. No. Okay.
Sorry, Madam Mayor.
Just one moment.
Not a procedural motion, Zara. Whereabouts, which clause?
Okay, councillors, I'll allow this through for Mr Troy to ask 5 questions, and just for the public and awareness, you do need to register because that helps us with the provision of the meeting and the time limits that we have to get through, which is quite a large agenda, particularly in December and then February when we come back. So that's why we have the registration period. It's not to disadvantage anyone. It's not because we don't want to hear you speak. It's because it can go on to quite a long, lengthy time, which would mean our meetings would carry over to another night. So, Mr Troy, if you'd like to ask your 5 questions or number of.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And on the basis of saving time, I've been able to circulate my questions. I understand and therefore request that I have permission to ask all 4 questions, all policy related, before a response is provided. And I understand that to be the format for the evening. In the Planning Officer's request to my question 1 on notice, the answer refers to only one element of the state planning policies, quoting, as a form of infill. My first question, does this expression not suggest that infill is almost the sole critical element, or at least the dominant, of council planners' selective consideration of what is included in the state planning policy documents nominated as applying to this amendment application? Question 2.
Hang on, just going to take one at a time if that's okay. I'll ask through you, Mr Russell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, thank you to Mr Troy. We have his questions in writing here, and as we indicated to the VRRA, we will do the courtesy of precision and on the record and provide Mr Troy with a written response on notice. Thank you.
Okay. Did you have a second question, Mr Troy?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question 2. What consideration have the planning officers given to the full context of the state planning policies number 2 and 3? And I quote, the officer's extraction in detail on page 155, I quote as follows, to promote a sustainable and well-planned pattern of settlement across the state with sufficient and suitable land to provide for a variety of housing, employment, recreation facilities and open space. I specifically note recreational facilities and open space. Do the planning officers agree these are critical elements in today's planning process? A simple yes or no would be adequate.
Through you, Mr Russell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On notice. Thank you.
And your third question?
Question 3. I refer to state policy number 3 and the dot points 2 to 5 on page 156 and ask, how do planning officers ignore these factors in favour of further urban development, with significantly more development referred by the applicant's own stated policy of development ongoing. I refer to the vision document. Clearly, this is identified as incrementalism, as the Outer Metro JDAB process revealed in earlier undertakings. This leads to how these processes are ignored when in fact the Vines enjoys the right, and this must be clearly understood, for the construction and operation of an international standard golf course and country club. The housing development was secondary to that configuration. Question 4, if I can move
Can
on.
I just let staff respond to that, if that's okay? That's quite a wordy question, but I'll see if staff would like to respond. Through you, Mr Russell.
Respectfully on notice, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And your 5th question and final question?
I refer to State Planning Policy number 7, so I go beyond number 2 and 3. This is for the design of a built environment, and I advance the following quotes. 4.1, background. The Government of Western Australia promotes the importance of design quality through better places and spaces, a policy for a built environment in Western Australia. That came out of their 2013 document.
Thank you. Would you like staff to respond to that?
There's second and subsequent bits which they can...
Is it a question?
It refers to other quotations.
It needs to be directed in a question, please, Mr Tory.
If I can, I will move to a question, but I want to nominate these 3 points.
It needs to be formed into a question, please. This is questions.
I refer in my question to the background 4.2. As the built environment evolves, it is appropriate that the planning system adapts to the increasing complexity of planning proposals by requiring greater emphasis on design quality. Good design outcomes improve the urban environment, benefit local communities, and have a positive legacy for future generations. I ask the staff, have they adhered to those principles?
Thank you. I'll ask the staff. Would you like to respond?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Respectfully, again, we'll take that on notice.
Thank you very much for your questions, Mr Tory.
My third take from that policy.
That's 5 questions. So I have allowed extra time, and that was 5 by my count on the sheet. And we're going to move to public statement time now.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and councillors.
Madam Mayor.
Okay. Through the CEO, I'd just like to make the statement that in the local meeting procedural law 2.12, recording and live streaming of proceedings. 1, no person is to use any electronic, visual or audio recording device or instrument to record the proceedings of the council or a committee unless the person has been given prior permission by the council. So I ask if anyone has a mobile phone on that is recording this council meeting, could they please turn it off? And would also advise and ask that they do not use or distribute that material. Section 2, subclause 1, does not apply if the recording is taken by or at the direction of the CEO with the permission of the council or committee. Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Through you, Councillor.
have we extended public participation time for today? We have already.
No, we're at 5.3.2. We did extend it by going through, sorry, thank you. So 5.3.2, which is questions without due notice, and we had begun that, which was Ms Jan Zek has registered to ask questions. And Ms Zek, if you would like to please come to the podium.
Jan Zek, West Swan. Thank you very much for the opportunity to ask these questions. My first question is to Mr Phil Russell. I emailed my submission regarding the Vines ODP to you on the 26th of September at 4:51 and followed up with a verifying email at 5:34 on the same day, and would have expected if you were not the responsible officer, you would have flicked it to the responsible officer who probably sits within metres of you. Can you tell me why my submission has not been included in the scheduled submissions for the Vines ODP included in this month's agenda?
Through you, Mr Russell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If Ms Zek is suggesting, and I haven't checked the schedule of submissions, that it's not in there, then properly I will need to go back and investigate to give her a forthright and accurate answer to a question, so I will take that on notice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Russell.
Thank you. My next question is, are the City of Swan staff familiar with the referral guidelines for the 3 WA threatened black cockatoo species produced by the Department of Agriculture, Water and Environment, Canberra 2022?
Through you, Mr Van der Leen.
Yes, we are, and the detail of that can be answered by Mr. Russell.
Thank you.
Sorry, was that a yes?
Yes, my understanding he said
Sorry,
yes.
I did have trouble hearing him.
Okay.
Okay, so if you know about these referral guidelines, how can you possibly endorse the Vines ADP when you know what the guidelines are?
Through you, Mr Russell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In the interests of equity and fairness, I don't propose to answer Ms Zek's questions in any manner different to what I've already addressed in terms of the VRRA, Mr Dixon Lowe and Mr Troy. I will also take those questions on notice, Madam Mayor, and give a forthright answer in due course.
Do you have a third question?
I do, but I'm going to swap who it's to. So my next one is directed to Jim Coton. Considering that the portion of Ellenbrook Avenue currently being constructed between Massara and Henley Street in Ellenbrook is clearly within black cockatoo territory, with night roosts, nesting trees and foraging habitat either within the proposed road reserve immediately adjacent to it or within the designated buffers for the 3 WA threatened black cockatoo species, why hasn't the City referred the roadworks to the Commonwealth Minister for the Environment, or DCCEEW, for a decision as to whether the proposed roadwork is a controlled action?
Thank you for that question. And through you, Mr Coton.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. That section of road is subject to an application for a clearing permit at present, and the City has provided relevant advice to the department on that matter and is awaiting a decision.
Okay, thank you.
And my last question is also to Mr Coton. Considering the proximity of the proposed Ellenbrook Avenue alignment to remnant vegetation, black cockatoo habitat, a conservation category wetland, through the middle of Bush Forever 200, Bankshill woodlands of the Swan Coastal Plain threatened ecological community, 3 gas lines, 2 monitoring stations, an encroachment of associated earthworks within the compound of the APA gas monitoring station, Priority 1 agricultural soil protected under the Swan Valley Act, and with the pick-up, drop-off and parking zones of a primary school with around 400 students, which is a comprehensive, why hasn't a comprehensive environmental assessment been undertaken?
Through you, Mr Coton.
Great question.
That was quite a complex question. I'll take that one on notice, and if I can get a copy of that question in writing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for those questions. And we'll move to part 6, which is public statement time. So registration for public statement time at council meeting was required by 10 a.m. on Wednesday, the 11th of December 2024. And public statements are for general matters of the city and not for items on the agenda. And we had not had any requests for public statements. So move to part 7, which is petitions, and we have no petitions presented that need tabling at this meeting tonight. And part 8, which is deputations. All deputations for items on the agenda were heard at the Agenda Forum, which was held on the 4th of December 2024. Tonight there's quite a few announcements by myself, and I'm really pleased to advise that the City was successful in obtaining $3.87 million grant for the Brabham District Community Centre from the federal government's Competitive Thriving Suburbs Funding Grants. And we are very grateful to local federal member Tanya Lawrence for that fantastic grant, which is really going to help our community. And on top of $4 million in the developer contributions, the building of the $8 million community centre will commence next financial year. The state government has also announced an additional $3.5 million allocation, and that's for the Beecherburra Road, Marshall Road interchange. This will bringing its total contribution to $6 million. So the works on these intersections had been delayed, allowing completion of the access road for the Ballajura train station and the new Ellenbrook train station line. So this project will commence construction in early 2025. Last week, the City held the groundbreaking ceremony for the $7.5 million Ellenbrook Community Hub as well, so that was pretty exciting. That was the sod turning, and the scope for this project was also made possible through the additional $2 million in funding we recently secured through Lotteries West. So it's been a really, really big early Christmas present for the City of Swan, and this is going to make a huge difference in our community, as I just had. Rounding out this successful month, we've also have a few announcements, and that was the news of the Ellenbrook Study Hub. So for those that aren't familiar, upstairs in the Ellenbrook Library, there is a space to the right-hand side as you walk in upstairs, and that will be established through the inaugural round of federal government's Suburban Study Hubs program. So what that means is that that space above the Ellenbrook Library to the right, where we used to have offices, will be transformed into a space for university and study and tertiary students who may have to travel quite a distance to university to study, who may not be able to study at home, who may not have anywhere to study at home, which means that it's going to be open 24 hours under a swipe card system for those students to be able to access somewhere for them to study, to also have meetings online with tutors and workshops for our university and TAFE students. And this was also made possible through that funding, which was approximately $1 million. So that will be over the next 3 years, and that's a really, really important new service to be delivered to our community via the city's operational partner, who is Lumen. It's called Auspiced by RDA Wheatbelt. And the next one we have is the announcement show the strength that is the strength of the city's advocacy program. This is why we go to our state and federal members to ask for this sort of money to help improve the services in the City of Swan. And we'll look to forward those further commitments as we head into the state elections, state and federal elections next year. So, also, as I said, there was quite a few. On December the 3rd, the City of Swan won the Services and Events category in the Regional Capitals Alliance WA 2021, which was the most accessible communities WA award. So we were also named a highly commended winner. Just going to grab that one there for the next one. We had launched as a pilot in 2023, which the initiative was to design and help businesses improve access and inclusion with the aim to increase customers and create a welcoming region for all. And our prize was a $200 cheque, which was donated to a local charity, which we will gift to the Swan City Youth Service, who are located in Midland here. I encourage other businesses in the City of Swan to take part in the free accessibility program as well, because it really is worthwhile to the members of our community. So if you'd like to get involved, just let me know, and we can also give you the email address for that. Last month, the City was also acknowledged by West Australia Football Commission for the best football facility of the year for the $30 million Dayton District Open Space project. So if you haven't been out there to have a look, or if it's on your way or you're going past, go out and check out that new facility. It's really amazing out there. The integrated sports complex is home for the many sporting clubs, including the Caversham Suns Football Club, and we also have the new hockey playing fields and the new ovals as well. We have also received a beautiful award for the Most Accessible Communities Award, which is winning the category for services and events. So we really are going all round here at the City of Swan. And this recognition acknowledges the effort of Swan businesses that have been undertaking improvements with the city in their skills and their access arrangements for those with special needs. And I just want to give a massive thanks as well to all those people involved in these projects, particularly staff. These awards are really tangible recognition of what we do here and the wonderful facilities and services that the City of Swan provides to our community. And there are so many other projects underway that I'm sure that you'll hear more about them in our Swan Scoop-On and our news and online. So we move to leave of absence, part 10. We have Councillor Jones from the 1st of February to the 22nd of February 2025 inclusive. We have myself, Mayor Richardson, 27th of December 2024 until the 5th of January 2025 inclusive. Councillor Singh, 29th of January to the 28th of February 2025. And we have Councillor Howlett from the 20th of the 12th 24 to the 30th of the 12th 2024 still. And we also have got this one, that one, I think that's the 3. Yep, and I'll just ask if there are any other councillors, members requesting leave. Councillor Bowman.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, for not sending in earlier. 25th of January to the 5th of February inclusive, please.
Sorry, 25th of January to 5th Feb. Okay, if there are any other councillors who have any leave of absence, could you please, yes? Oh, was that another separate one? Thank you. We have Councillor Jones from the 13th of February to the 28th of Feb inclusive as well. Thank you. Now I'll just ask a mover. Do I have a mover? Councillor Zanino and a seconder. Councillor Ringo, and was there anyone against? No, that's moved. Thank you. And move on to part 11. So we have confirmation of minutes. 11.1, confirmation of minutes of the ordinary meeting of council held on the 13th of November 2024. Can I please ask for a mover? Councillor Bowman, and a seconder. Councillor Singh, is there anyone against? It's moved. Thank you. And move on to part 12, which is business left over from previous meetings, and there was none. So this brings us to part 13, which is adoption of those recommendations that were contained in items not withdrawn. I see people getting excited, getting to the items tonight. For the benefit of community members observing the meeting, the council uses an en bloc method of decision making. So this means that the agenda items where council supports the officer recommendation are not debated separately. One vote is taken on all of the items, and the officer recommendation is therefore the decision of the council. The following items have not been withdrawn for individual consideration, and they will be dealt with via the en bloc method. Therefore, the officer's recommendation will be the decision of council, and those items are 14.1.1, policy review, city grant and sponsorship funding. 14.1.2, policy revised, volunteering. 14.3.1, consideration of submissions, proposed amendment number 215 to the local planning scheme number 17, which is to add additional uses for lot 4, number 1447, Great Northern Highway, Upper Swan, LPS 17 215. 14.3.2, which is consideration of submissions, and that's the proposed amendment for number 222 to local planning scheme number 17, to insert dwelling as an additional use, lot 463, number 108 Swan Street, Guildford, LPS 17-222. We have 14.3.3, which is the consideration of submissions, proposed amendment number 191 to local planning scheme number 17, to insert telecommunications infrastructure as an additional use on lot 1003 Vidello Drive, The Vines, LPS 17-191. Item 14.4.1, which is the request to reopen the Barrier Road closure, a portion of Talbot Road in Hazelmere. 14.4.2, proposed permanent closure of a portion of Patrana Promenade, Ellenbrook. 14.5.1 is the financial management report for the period ending 31st of October 2024. And 14.5.2, list of accounts paid October 2024. Can I have a mover, please? Okay. And Councillor Miles, seconder. Thank you. Is anyone against? No, it's carried.
Madam Mayor, I move that we suspend our local law to be able to change the order of business under 2.2 of our standing orders, so that items 14.3.4 and item 14.3.5 can be dealt with first to allow these to be supported, done such that the community can go home early.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Brodovnik and, sorry, seconder, Councillor Brodovnik. And anyone against? No, that's carried. Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Okay, so we move to 14, which are reports withdrawn for debate or absolute majority vote required. So the following reports have been withdrawn for debate or have an absolute majority vote. So in accordance with the Meeting Procedures Local Law 2023 and they will be dealt with by council individually. So we're going to go to 14.3.4 to begin with, which is the proposed amendment number 9 to the Vines Outline Development Plan number 37, ODP-37G, which is on page 151. And this is a proposed motion by Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillors, I move that Council resolve to 1. Recommend to the West Australian Planning Commission that the proposed amendment 9 to the Vines Outline Development Plan number 37 be refused for the following reasons. 1. Proposed modifications for a driving range and the R60 housing on the golf course is considered detrimental to the character and amenity of the Vines estate. 2. Approval of the proposed modification would be contrary to good planning principles which are designed to regulate land use and development, to protect public interest, which in this case is very significant, all in support of the amenity of the area that has important regional and tourism value. 3. Any major changes to the golf course, especially as an amendment to accommodate residential development on the recreational open space, will have devastating effects by destroying the very essence of this unique facility, its environmental and tourist appeal, as the golf course was and still is the principal component of the resort development. 4. The declared subject land is unrepresentative of the lot 1003 in question and undermines the assessment of government agencies as the full implications of the proposed modifications are not presented. And 5. Prohibitive elements such as 3 emerging safety hazards created by the proposed modifications, absence of bushfire emergency plans, and the adverse impacts of higher traffic volumes expected to be generated by the proposed additional housing and driving range facility are not adequately addressed. And advise all parties that they made a submission on the proposed amendment of Council's resolution, and the reasons for the changes are in the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Henderson. Question, Councillor Zanino? Oh, you're very quick. Just about to ask if I have a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Zanino. Now, is there anyone against? Then it's carried. Thank you. And thank you very much to everyone that attended tonight for that particular item. So then we're now going to go back to that change in the list.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Still like to wish everyone in the gallery a Merry Christmas for those that are departing. Thank you. A very safe Christmas. Okay, we're going to now move to 14.3.5, which is Responsible Authority Report, Proposed Childcare Premises, Lot 33, Number 9, and that is Lot 34, Number 7, Fauntleroy Street, Guildford, DA 679-24, on page 210. Proposed motion, Deputy Mayor Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My motion is that Council resolve to advise the Metro Outer Development Assessment Panel that it does not endorse the Officer recommendation to approve the development application. The reason for the motion is the development application proposes to remove one mature flooded gum tree, which is an endemic species in the locality, and also to remove a bottle tree. This removal of trees is not aligned with the Guildford Heritage Area Planning Policy. The traffic study dates from 2017, well before the increase in traffic use of Swan Street East and Fauntleroy Street as an outcome of A, the significant expansion of St Jude's Edge Care in Swan Street East, and B, the increase in use of the East Guildford train station and the associated increase in parking and traffic. The limited capacity of the junction of Fauntleroy Street and James Street because of the narrow width of Fauntleroy Street. Perth Airport has objected to the development application as the childcare centre is within the flight path and the type of activities in the childcare centre are arguably unacceptable under State Planning Policy 5.1.
Thank you very much. I'll ask, is there a seconder? Councillor Howlett. Is there anyone against? No. It's carried. Thank you. Now we move back to 14.1.1 Policy Review, City Grant and Sponsorship Funding. 14.1.3 Policy Review. Deputy Mayor Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My motion is that Council resolve to revise the proposed policy POL C172 attendance at events, Council members and CEO as follows. A, replace section 5.3b by deleting the following. Where the CEO attends an approved event relevant to this policy, the cost of attendance, including the attendance of a partner, is paid for by the City. B, substitute the following words. Where the CEO attends an approved event relevant to this policy, the cost of attendance is paid for by the City. Any costs relating to an accompanying partner will be the responsibility of the CEO. 2, adopt the revised policy POLC 172 attendance at events, Council members and CEO as attached. 3, authorise the CEO to make any formatting, nomenclature or other minor changes to the policy during its period of currency. And the reason for the motion is that the reason for changing the officer recommendation is that there is no reason for the CEO attendance at events to be treated differently to a member of council.
Thank you very much. Question? Oh, seconder? Councillor Bowman? I think Councillor Howlett actually had her hand up first. So Councillor Howlett? Okay. Is there anyone against? It's carried. Okay. We're going to move to 14.1. So 14.1.4 now, City of Swan Bushfire Brigades Local Law 2024, page 37. This is withdrawn for absolute majority. So 1, make the City of Swan Bushfire Brigades Local Law 2024 as attached. 2, complete the local law making process in accordance with the Local Government Act 1995. Does any councillor wish to debate this item?
Move that the officer's recommendation be adopted.
Thank you. So mover was Councillor Henderson.
I'll second that.
And a seconder, Councillor Deputy Mayor Johnson. Is anyone against? No. It's carried. Okay, and then move on to 14.2.1. The MRS Amendment 140941, portion of North Ellenbrook West, which is on page 59. Proposed motion by Councillor Caldano. If you'd like to read out your alternate motion.
That Council resolve to advise the WAPC, and that's the WA Planning Commission, that MRS Amendment, that's Metropolitan Region Scheme Amendment 1409/41, portion of North Ellenbrook for rezoning of the land under the MRS as advertised is not supported. Reason for the motion: the City does not and will not have the capacity or financial means to undertake or accept responsibility for construction/provision of any regional infrastructure such as proposed North Link interchange, no agreement has been reached between the funding parties, in brackets developers, state and federal agencies, to fund the total cost of a road interchange with Northlink, and the city should not continue to support urban sprawl.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Howlett. Is anyone against? Do you wish to debate it? Yes, thank you. Councillor Catalano.
Thank you. And this amendment is for MRS rezoning. Semi-rural farmland and bushland to urban, hot treeless tarmac sheds and rows of houses, the start of an almost 1,000% increase in Bullsbrook's population from 7,000 to 85,000 people. Wastefully, Perth urban sprawl with its house and land packages model is forecast to bloat out to 220 kilometres along the coast from Two Rocks to Dawesville and beyond. Sadly, the world's longest city with all the accompanying loss of unique bushland and natural environments. Will it be worth it? In 2024, WA Today reported that treeless estates on Perth's urban fringe are vulnerable to abandonment in future, to become ghost suburbs, inhospitable because of climate change and water scarcity. Since the 1980s, water use has doubled while rainfall has been low. In 2023, the United Nations Secretary said, "The era of global warming has ended. The era of global boiling has arrived." Areas of urban fringe or peri-urban sprawl also lack job centres, public transport and community amenities. Will Bullsbrook have to wait 30 years for a train, as Ellenbrook did? Already, Bullsbrook residents are saying that they can't travel directly to the hospital in Midland, as new bus routes now take them to Ellenbrook. Meanwhile, Ellenbrook will likely have paid parking for the first time as car-dependent suburbs continue to be built around it, filling the CBD with parked cars. Not surprisingly, residents in Perth's urban sprawl frontier suburbs are angry because they're not living the lifestyle they were sold. They have astronomical summer electricity bills to keep their homes livable and lack internet and phone coverage. And as they must depend on their cars for transport, their houses have to have double garages, which on ever smaller blocks leaves little space for trees on verges or in backyards, little space for additional public and street parking also, with increasingly intolerable commute times and congestion. Haven't we seen this already in the city's new suburbs? Then there are the estates like this planned for North Ellenbrook, surrounded by bush with only one road in and out. Urban sprawl costs taxpayers and infrastructure subsidies in out-of-fringe developments. The state infrastructure strategy puts the cost as 2 to 4 times more than infill development. Curtin University Sustainability Policy Institute estimated every new dwelling on the urban fringe requires about $90,000 in taxpayers' subsidies compared to similar infill dwellings. With no agreement between government and developers about who will pay for this Northlink intersection for this North Ellenbrook West plan, it's more than likely that with the $100 million budget, that the $100 million budget will not be enough, and that the City of Swan ratepayers will be left having to foot the rest of the bill, because after all, it could be argued the council approved the rezoning. Just a year ago, in 2023, WA Today quoted Limnios, Property Development Group Managing Director, and in quotes, "Unless we act quickly to contain urban sprawl, future generations will call our civic leaders."
And that's your time. I'll ask Councillor Howlett as the seconder.
Thank you. Councillors, the city does not have the capacity or the financial means, as is stated in Councillor Catalano's reason, to undertake or accept responsibility for the construction or the provision of the regional infrastructure that's required for the Northlink interchange. We know now the total cost of Stock Road. It was tens of millions of dollars. My memory fails me, but perhaps Mr. Coaten can confirm, but a figure well over $50 million comes to mind. Simply, the city does not have the capacity to fund the shortfall of any funding for this proposed Northlink interchange.
Thank you, Councillor Catalano. So is there anyone against the motion? Councillor Miles.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I appreciate Councillor Catalano raising the issue of urban sprawl. It's something that I think we need to tackle across all levels of government. However, as you raised in your reason for your alternative motion, no agreement has been reached between the funding parties, and the city shouldn't be responsible for funding that piece of major infrastructure. However, in the officer's recommendation, which I foreshadow if this fails, it says that we support the MRS amendment prior to lifting of urban deferment once an agreement is reached between the funding parties. So that's addressed, I think, pretty clearly.
Thank you. Does anyone would like to speak for the motion? Question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It continues on from Councillor Miles. Question to the CEO or to the relevant staff. Is there anywhere in the officer's report that it's actually stating that we will be paying for or contributing to a state road interchange?
Through you, Mr. Russell, Mr. van der Linde.
Madam Mayor, no, the report actually confirms that the council don't have the ability to do that.
My next question is, if the proposed cost was $100 million, we all know everything's gone up, and it then comes to $150 million. If this was to go ahead, who would pay for that?
Madam Mayor, through you, that is the uncertain part at this stage. At this stage, there's funding made available through federal government, state government, and the developers up to $100 million. Yeah, $100 million. Unfortunately, the design and the location and the design of the off-ramp hasn't progressed to a point where there's a costing is available. And that is the hurdle for the developers to enter into agreement with state government at the moment. Now, with recent changes to the MRS text, there is now provision under the MRS for the state government to enter into a mechanism in this regard to fund regional infrastructure, similar to a DCP with them. So that is being investigated at the moment between the parties. But until such time as the design has reached the concept stage and there's an estimate, that they won't be able to enter into an agreement. But the intent is that, and that is what we make clear in the report and in the recommendation, that the total cost of that infrastructure should be carried by government and developers, with the local government not providing for it at all.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, my next question, probably to the Director of Infrastructure. Tonkin Highway, is that a local government controlled road or a state controlled road? And a follow-up question, just to make it easier, if it is what I think it is, a state controlled road, does local governments ever pay towards a state controlled road, or is it always others?
Good question through you, Mr. Coaten.
It's a main road, it's a state controlled road. So costs associated with a state controlled road would normally be met by the federal and state governments. I wouldn't want to say that there's never been a situation where a local government hasn't contributed to an interchange in that situation, but certainly it would normally be funded by the state, the responsibility of the state.
Thank you. I'll return back to where we were, councillors. Does anyone like to speak for the motion? No? Anyone like to speak against the motion? If not, Councillor Henderson.
I just want to make a couple of points, Madam Mayor, and one of them is that if you go to page 96, councillors, you'll see a green area on the map with the horizontal hatching on it. Now, if you haven't noticed before, but it says there, Bush Forever Area Addition, right? That's an addition to Bush Forever. For us to get some more Bush Forever to be able to support our cockies and the rest is fantastic. For us to knock this back, we were saying, oh, we don't want the Bush Forever site. Well, come on. That would be a travesty. The other aspect is that I'm pretty sure if you look into current planning law, whilst trees in the past have been something that we haven't seen a lot of, we now have requirements to plant trees in urban developments. So doesn't mean to say that you're going to have wall-to-wall roofs. You're going to have some trees put in there per that plan. So I think that's fundamental as well. And I want to go back to about 1995, roughly, and that's about when discussions got serious about the North East Development Plan. Councillor Zanino will be across that as well. The fact of the matter is, I got yelled at for putting a little hiccup in housing development in Brabham. Well, I think it would be irresponsible of us to try and stop significant portions of the North East Corridor development when the Brabham one was simply, can you fix the problems? So, councillors, please put this down. We need to progress this, and great to see some bush oversight coming into the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. I'll ask again for the last call. Does anyone like to speak for the motion? Anyone like to speak against the motion? Councillor Catalano, your right of reply.
Thank you. No. Well, I think 1995, when this was all, thought up, says it all. I mean, it's a long time ago, and we have lost a hell of a lot of our bushland, and this is really the last of the last. So it should have actually, the sprawl should have stopped way back then. But here we are, decades later, acres and hectares of bushland and agricultural land gone under houses and commercial, and we still have a housing crisis. We have we're heading for the longest city in the world, and we have diminishing bushland. I mean, to say that we should promote sprawl to get bush forever sites, I mean, that is a true travesty. And I'm surprised to even hear that would be mentioned or even considered, that that's a trade-off. That's not a trade-off. That is actually a disaster. So anyway, the thing is that, the time, as I've said so many times on this council since I've been here, the time to change is now. Resilience to change, we have to be resilient in the future, but that means we have to change now. It doesn't mean that we continue to do the same things that brought about the mess that we're finding ourselves in. When it comes to sprawl, when it comes to lack of loss of bushland, when it comes to drying metro area. And governments like, even this little local government have their part to play, and their part to play is in rejecting these amendments and these proposals when they come before it. And getting the recipe for sustainable housing solutions for Perth right. Excuse me, if you don't mind, please. Thank you, you're disturbing me.
Just keep to the points of rebuttal,
yes, thank
please.
you. If Perth stays on its current path, it risks intensifying all existing problems related to commuting, the environment and social cohesion. And while other cities globally are innovating, Perth risks falling behind, burdening future generations with a less sustainable, less efficient and less livable city. You have been told. This is now. This is it. And the words that I've got out of my research, it's not just me that's saying it. It's time, Council. Councillors, it's time.
Thank you,
Please
Councillor
support this
Catalano.
motion.
We'll now take a vote. Those in favour? Councillor Catalano, Councillor Knight, Councillor Dawn, Deputy Mayor Johnson and Councillor Howlett. And those against? Councillor Singh, Councillor Ringo, we had Councillor Bowman, Councillor Jones, Councillor McCulloch, and we've got Councillor Miles and Councillor Zanino, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Podovnik and myself. So the motion is lost. Yes, so it was 9-5. 10-5. And Councillor Miles, You wish to move the officer's recommendation?
Yep. So I just read it out, right?
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bowman. Is anyone against? Yes, I am. Okay. Do you wish to speak against?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to follow on, obviously, from that debate, I'm obviously moving the officer's recommendation. I think it was made very clear that within that recommendation, the city is very clear in their request that as a local government, we cannot afford to fund this massive infrastructure project, and that does rely in the hands of the state, federal government, and the private investors. And I think, if we're going to be honest, the private companies that are going to earn a whole lot of money out of these kind of developments should probably chip in a bit more. But that's just my personal opinion. I think it would be smart of us as a council to support this. However, I'll just respond to the inevitable comments of Councillor Catalano. I think it is important that as a local government, we do play a part in ensuring that urban sprawl does not continue and is reduced, and infill should be a priority. And I think that ultimately, that is a huge problem for people like me who, will never be able to afford a home close to services or the city, because that's just the way it works. But right now, in this moment, in this motion, we can't have all the power to change a planning system that's decades old and in the wrong direction. But this is where we're at right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'll ask Councillor Bowman as the seconder.
I'll reserve my right.
Thank you. I'll ask is anyone again? Anyone like to speak against? Councillor Catalano.
Thank you. Yes, I am opposed to it because of the inevitable issue of sprawl. It's not going to go away. In fact, that's what we have. And just a year ago, in 2023, WA Today quoted Limnios Property Group Managing Director, and I quote, "Unless we act quickly to contain urban sprawl, future generations will call our civic leaders and business leaders of today the greedy generation that had zero consideration for the environment, financial waste through unneeded freeway expansions and infrastructure costs just to satisfy development that doesn't make sense." The state government says it will not curb urban sprawl as a priority in a housing crisis, yet decades of greenfield sprawl has not improved housing affordability or availability to this present day. The policies and business as usual approach of land and house packages have not, and clearly are not, and probably will not work to avoid a housing crisis now in the future. If the current models, theories and policies were working after the last 40 years of rapid sprawl, there would be no housing crisis at all, and we know that's not the case. In 2023, in Architecture Australia, Elizabeth Farrelly said, "Inner city areas with good infrastructure," and by that she means transport and commercial, "can have their populations increase with good quality infill. Not with glassy, soulless, wind-generating towers jammed bedroom to bedroom in our old inner-city precincts, now banned in many European cities, but with broadly 8-storey buildings on streets. Back in Perth, there's a lot of talk about NIMBYs opposing infill. I want to add here that in opposing the Midland Oval redevelopment, the Midland community were not opposed to infill, but they wanted to retain heritage buildings and a central park so that it would be more attractive for good quality infill developments. Sadly, the community have not got what they wanted, and Midland is now full of empty blocks with literally no infill because it's just not attractive. Infill should not be a means to just stack people in. As Elizabeth Farrelly states, it must offer both individual dignity and collective cohesion, street-level community engagement for neighbourhood creation, aesthetic delight and improving mental health, physical and fitness. Therefore, with a distinct lack of vision around infill development, despite community raising great ideas and the continuing subsidy for urban sprawl, it's no wonder that Perth is failing to dismally to meet its target of 47% infill. In fact, in 2023, it only reached 29%.
Thank you very much. Now I'll ask, does anyone like to speak for the motion? Does no one like to speak for? Does anyone like to speak against? Councillor Bowman?
Madam Mayor, I'm speaking for. Madam Mayor, Perhaps I should declare a conflict of interest in this one because I've got 4 teenage kids at home and there's no way they're living with me forever. So, Madam Mayor, we need to look at affordable options as well. But I want to paint this picture. Imagine working in the city, sitting down in a nice train carriage, shuffling along, going past Whiteman Park, past Ellenbrook and to North Ellenbrook. I get out and I live in a TOD, a transit-orientated development, where there's some more high-rises. There's nice pocket parks. My favourite coffee shop, or probably at that time of night, is a favourite bar, where there's interaction. Madam Mayor, people need to go somewhere. Where are we going to put them? Madam Mayor, this area has been identified. I know it quite well. But Madam Mayor, from what I'm hearing, the issues that I'm hearing against mainly come back to this interchange. Now, I may be confused, but that interchange, I heard staff say, we're not paying for it. We've told them before, prior to me being on council. And I think even afterwards, we said, no way. We even said no way to stage 3 or whatever because the traffic would come through different areas. So I think we've been very, very supportive of looking at this from all angles. But Madam Mayor, we have to look at it from all angles. We have to look at it at the younger generation, like Councillor Miles, who probably is saving up all his pennies to hopefully get into a house. Madam Mayor, perhaps we need to be advocating to the state government to start looking at that North Ellenbrook train station because we know that it will be needed. But these are the things that we should be looking at. We should be looking at smarter house designs. We should be looking at better solar setbacks. We should be looking at not having darker roofs on our buildings. We can do that. We can be the leaders here. But we need to actually look at this item before us. And that's what I think Councillor Miles is doing.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. Now I'll ask again, is there anyone who'd like to speak against the motion? Anyone like to speak for the motion? If there's not, your right of reply. Wave your hand. Put that matter to the vote. Those in favour? So Councillor Singh, Councillor Ringo, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Jones, Councillor McCulloch, Councillor Miles, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Prodovnik, and myself. And those against? Councillor Catalano, Councillor Knight, Councillor Dawn, Deputy Mayor, and Councillor Hallett. So we had, it's lost, and it's 10-5. Sorry, carried 10-5. Thank you. We'll move to the next item. 14.4.3. Councillor McCulloch. And that's the implementation of Ellenbrook Area Parking Plan, which is on page 253, and your proposed motion, Councillor McCulloch.
No, it's fully broken.
If you can
It's
use
fine.
Councillor Jones's.
Okay, 14.43, the implementation of the Ellenbrook Area Parking Plan. My proposed motion that Council resolve to adopt the proposed Ellenbrook Area Parking Plan with the following amendment. A, the area that is shown as all-day paid parking, parking station number 20, be replaced with all-day paid parking, first 2 hours free. And 2, constitute the parking zone Ellenbrook Town Centre parking station number 20 as proposed. The reason for the motion is to allow customers frequenting local businesses to access them for an acceptable period of time.
Thank you, Councillor McCulloch. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Jones? And is there anyone against? Do you wish to debate it? No. Councillor Bowman? Thank you. Councillor McCulloch.
Thank you, councillors. We know that city staff have been working with local businesses and community to make sure that we have this Ellenbrook area parking plan right. And with business consultation from probably over about 30 businesses, there were a couple of concerns that were raised. And so this proposed motion with minor changes allows those businesses to have their concerns alleviated and to make provision for customers frequenting businesses in that area attend appointments for a reasonable period of time before having to pay, and therefore it allows our businesses to continue to do business and not discourage clients from attending those businesses. I think that's pretty much it in regards to that, so I just encourage you to support this minor change.
Thank you. Councillor Jones, do you wish to speak?
Yes, I just think that this demonstrates that we've actually listened to the businesses and that it's a win-win for both sides. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask if any councillors wish to speak against the motion. Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, I thank Councillor McCulloch for moving that amendment because it's better than what it was. But Madam Mayor, I'm torn on this item because what it feels like to me is someone's got my hand behind my back making me make a decision. And that's the part that I don't like. Why are we doing this? I always like to ask the question why. Having 4 kids growing up, they taught me to keep asking why. And that's because we got the train station. Yep, fantastic. The train line. Fantastic. But Madam Mayor, with that's come problems now too. Because with that, and it's a flow on problems, we have 500 parking bays that I've always said is not enough. The state government has worked out the formula for that train station on the maximum number of people are going to catch a bus or walk or ride. On the first day that train station was open, it was full. And the businesses were telling me the impacts it had. So that's why my hand's behind my back, because I really need to support it, because the businesses have come to me and said, please don't defer it, which was my original thing. I'm not happy, and my hand's behind my back again, because the signs went up before this council passed this motion. The flow-on impact. The flow-on impact is now the shopping centre, I've been told, and I try to avoid it in December, has a 3-hour parking limit. Now, I had to go Christmas shopping the other day, and I was there for more than 3 hours, and I hate shopping. So what do? The flow-on impact, the traffic past the seniors' retirement village is going to increase significantly. What's going to happen there? Are people going to do bog laps around Ellenbrook? Sorry, that's my youth coming out. Bog laps around Ellenbrook, trying to find a parking spot. I asked about the 40k speed limit. It took me 12 months to get a, yes, we're going to do it, not from our staff. We have to get approval for main roads. When is that happening? I don't know. And again, these are all flow-on impacts. So I'm really reluctant to support this motion because my hand's tied behind my back. I'm really reluctant because I'm being forced to make a decision. What is the impact to the residents that live close by? Now, we know from historical other train stations, 1 kilometre away, people will park their car to avoid the $2. There's a lot of residential bays, houses in that area. We have not looked at that, and we need to. So, Madam Mayor, I'm forced to make a decision. I'm going to have to probably support Councillor McCulloch's motion, but I reluctantly do it because of how we had to get to this position.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. I'll ask, does anyone like to speak for the motion? Councillor Henderson.
Perhaps I can convince Councillor Bowman to change his mind. I think this motion is a good compromise, and the reason I say so is that you've got to start somewhere, and one of the things we should do, of course, is to look at it, see how it goes. If we find that the first 2 hour free doesn't work, we can modify it. So I think the idea that's been put forward is supportive of the businesses, and they have, in turn, will have to see how it works out. I'm sure they'll come to us and say there's a problem here if they see one, and we can make appropriate adjustments to policy. So given that, I do think that we've got a good balance here, and we should start at the 2 hours point and see how we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Are there any councillors who'd like to speak against the motion? That's against the motion. If not, I'll ask again, is there anyone who'd like to speak for the motion? Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to support this motion, and the main reason is that, if I'm understanding this correctly, parking station number 20 is basically a car park or a number of car parks, as indicated by the hatching just there. The car parks in Midland that are city-owned are required to pay for the whole time. So the concept of having the first 2 hours free in a car park is a really good one, and I'd like to extend that concept to Midland. And so therefore, if Ellenbrook can have it, I'm going to support it in Ellenbrook, and I'd like to see the same in Midland. So I'm supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll ask again, is there anyone against the motion? Does anyone like to speak for the motion? If not, Councillor McCulloch, you're right to reply.
Thank you. Councillors, moving forward, the station is open, and it is important that we progress this so that we have some surety for our businesses and community. We can continue to look at the patterns of utilisation in the coming days, weeks and months and make sure that we've got it right. Councillor Bowman spoke about the flow-on impact. Yes, definitely, things to consider, but we will, as councillors who are working hard for our community, be keeping our finger on the pulse and be making sure that we are understanding the needs of our community. There may be further tweaks as we receive feedback from both business and community, and it may be at this stage a work in progress, but I would encourage you to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Val. I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Singh, Councillor Ringo, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Jones, Councillor McCulloch, Councillor Miles, Councillor Knight, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Prodovnik, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Howlett, Councillor Dawn and myself. And those against is Councillor Catalano. So the motion is carried. 14-1. Okay, thank you. And now we're going to move on to 14.5.3, which is the rates and revenue plan and review of the UV properties, which is on page 352. Proposed motion by Councillor Zanino. If you would like to please read out your alternate motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillors, I rise to move that Council resolve to 1. Undertake community consultation and engagement prior to Council considering to endorse the revenue and rating plan for 2024-25. 2. Not approve the review of the city's UV priorities to determine the predominant use of the land until community consultation and engagement has occurred in advance about the proposed changes, especially in relation to affected ratepayers within the rural areas. 3. Authorise the CEO to prepare a report on the option of Council creating a new rural residential zone prior to Council endorsing the revenue and rating plan for 2024-25, and 4, authorise the CEO to engage and consult with all affected property owners and to present any submissions received to Council prior to Council making a decision as to whether to apply to the Minister for a change in valuation method. And a reason for changing the officer's recommendation is community interest and to ensure ratepayers are consulted regarding proposed changes, implications and impacts of rating criteria, valuations and methodology prior to endorsing the revenue and rating plan for 24-25.
Thank you very much. I'll ask, do I have a seconder? Yes, Councillor Henderson. And I'll ask, is there anyone against? No? Okay, thank you, Councillor Catalano. And I'll ask Councillor Zanino.
Thank you, councillors. There were a lot of lessons to be learnt by the UV rates review in 2017, where ratepayers were not given clear information about the methodology and implications of proposing changes to the rating method in the City of Swan. It's essential to ensure that consultation and engagement occurs in advance of Council's consideration or considering a new revenue and rating plan. This needs to include the impacts and implications for ratepayers of any proposed changes to the rating system, including GRV and UV, and how it relates to ratepayers and especially the rural land users. As part of this community engagement, in advance of considering the report, this also needs to illustrate clearly impacts of UV versus GRV rating on rural properties contained within the Swan Valley, Gidgee and Pierce wards. This should include visuals and tables with dollar values in 2 columns to indicate likely financial impacts on residents by moving from UV to GRV. Further, this consultation needs to outline the method of valuation and detailed definitions of land use and predominant land use, as it is important to acknowledge the unique situation of rural landowners within the City of Swan and their significant contribution to maintaining rural land which benefits the wider community and the natural environment. We may need to, as I said in the recommendation, to create a new rural zone, which would be a rural residential zone with its own rate in the dollar. I'd also like to recommend that as part of this community engagement, that a short-term reference group should be formed with city staff, interested Pierce and Swan Valley Gidgee ward councillors, as well as representations from the various ratepayer progress associations within these wards, given the significant impacts that could be proposed, especially affecting rural landowners. This is necessary to avoid confusing information distributed as part of the 2017 UV rating review, which also led to inequities for landowners who completed the form circulated by the city. These actions will greatly assist in ensuring that clear, concise and easily understandable information for residents is distributed, but which does not infringe on their right or privacy.
Zanino, I'll ask Councillor Henderson as the seconder.
No, finished. Thank you.
Councillor Henderson, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, I'll reserve my right, thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask, is anyone against? Councillor Catalano.
I've got some questions first to staff. Okay, rural residential zone, would that be for the whole of Swan Valley and Gidgegannup? I mean, what when it's prepare a report, would that be for all of those areas, or how do we know what the report is for?
Through you, Mr. Vasquez.
Through the chair, so a rural residential zone I can't really comment on. I guess that reads as a planning type issue, but as far as a differential rural residential rate, that's obviously the city does differential rates and it's part of the budget process each year. So for council to approve a rural residential rate, it can be done on the basis of zoning, land use or vacant land. So they're the factors that can be taken into account.
Okay, and would that mean that land has to be rezoned? Rural residential?
Through you, Mr. Vasquez.
Through the chair, not exactly. So we could use the current zoning for that differential rate.
So what would be the zoning that would be used for rural residential zone?
Or through the chair, I guess as the recommendation or the alternate motion is to do a report, so we would cover off those details.
Yeah, I know, but what I'm asking though is if a rural residential rate applies to an area that's a rural residential zone, does that area that's subject to that rate, that new rate in the dollar, does that area have to be rezoned rural residential?
Through the chair, no.
It can be zoned. What does it have to be zoned, or what can it be zoned? Because would it be zoned urban?
Through the chair, so yeah, as I said, so a differential rate, you can base it on the zoning, so we could use the current zoning. So properties potentially in a rural zone, it could be based on the land use, so we'd have to determine, put some criteria around the land use and what we consider appropriate land use for a rural residential differential rate. So that would be part of, I guess, the report that comes back on what options we would have, but don't have to create a new zone. We could use the current existing zones.
Based on, so that would be back to the predominant use issue. The predominant use would be the criteria by which a lot would be, they would be able to claim a rural residential zone rate.
Through the chair, not necessarily. It could just be based on the zone.
Yeah, but what's the zone? Sorry.
Well,
what is the zone? If it's not going to be land, if it's not going to be based on a criteria of predominant use of land, what's the zone? That's what I was asking. Does the city currently have rural residential?
I'll see you, Mr. van der Linde.
Madam Mayor, if I may try to assist.
Thank you.
It all depends on what the intent of Councillor Zanino's motion is. My interpretation of Councillor Zanino's motion, when he refers to rural residential, he refers to rural land that's got a house on it, which in my mind refers to the predominant use of that land, and it doesn't relate to the zoning. If that is the intent, then it could include various rural zones so we've got landscape zones, special rural zones, residential, rural residential zones. But my interpretation is if in any of those rural areas there is a house on and predominantly used for residential purposes, that would be captured by what Councillor Zanino's intention is.
Oh, thank you for clarifying that, because that's what I understood. So the other thing I wanted to ask then, the predominant use, isn't that the issue? And isn't that the problem that's been causing all the issues up until now? And that's the reason why this whole matter has been brought back to council?
That one through Mr. Vasquez.
Yes, through the chair, there's a lot of the conjecture and feedback from the community is the confusion around predominant rural use.
That's correct. That's what I've heard from. So the thing I don't understand though is, you know, is the community going to have anything different to what was planned or what was put to them back in 2017 through this motion?
Through you, Mr. Travascus.
Through the chair, I guess the motion would involve consultation. I wasn't here in 2017, so I can't really comment on that. But as per the motion, if the alternate was approved, we would undertake community engagement and consultation in accordance with our normal community consultation and engagement processes.
Okay, and one final question. Is it likely that a lot of ratepayers or a lot of people who are currently paying rural rates will, upon assessment, according to this predominant use of land, actually find themselves not paying higher, that they will in fact be paying higher rates because they are not using the land predominantly for rural purposes?
Through you, Mr. Travascus.
Yes, through the chair. So as part of the city's consultation, we would get a notional value from Landgate. Until we get that notional value, we can't really comment on whether the rates will go up and down, but what we can say is some will go up, but some will go down as well. Our recent examples that have come to council changing from UV to GRV have all mostly gone down.
Okay, but from what you know about the numbers of properties that are claiming a rural rate at the moment, but that will not be able to satisfy the predominant use as rural, do you know anything about whether those numbers will increase?
Through you, Mr. Travascus.
Through the chair, just to clarify, by increase you mean rates will increase?
No, I meant the numbers. I said the numbers, like the numbers of people who are paying rural rates at the moment, but who are not using the land predominantly for rural. Is there enough, or what do you think that there's likely to be an increase in those people who will not be able to claim the rural residential because they don't satisfy the criteria of predominant use, rural use?
Through the chair, yes, we expect many properties should change from UV to GRV.
Thank you. Councillor Bowman, you had a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, a couple of questions. Can the relevant director please advise if any other local governments that he is aware of, such as the Shire of Serpentine, Jarrahdale or Augusta Margaret River, have a category called rural residential?
Through you, Mr. Travascus.
Through the chair, yes, I can confirm there are other local governments with a differential rural GRV rate.
And through you, Madam Mayor, with recommendation 3, and perhaps to the CEO, since we're authorising him, will he actually look at those other local governments and see what they actually do with the rural residential rates in the report that comes back to council?
Through you, Mr. CEO.
Thank you. Yes, as with any report that comes to council, it'll be comprehensive. Mr. Travascus and I had a discussion this afternoon about those. And there's a variety of local governments, some who are quite clearly regional, as in Shire of Capel, but others who are metropolitan based. The City of Gosnells has a rural residential rate. But you need to look at it in a context. So we'll examine this before bringing a report back to council.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, have we received a briefing this year or whenever on the rating and equity? And if so, advice of when we received that?
Through you, Mr. Travascus.
Yes, and confirm there was a briefing.
And Madam Mayor, can the relevant director, probably the Director of Corporate, confirm that in that briefing there were slides in there that actually showed a number of properties would go down.
Through you, Mr. Travascus.
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. As I said before, though, we won't know the exact movement until we get those notional values from Landgate. So that was based on the best of information available. Yeah.
And Madam Mayor, with that best of information available, was there numbers provided on how many or the percentage that could go down?
Through you, Mr. Travascus.
Yes, there was.
And Madam Mayor, last question. I was hoping to get it out of that last question. Can the director advise, if you can remember, how many sort of numbers were in there? Because I can't bring it up straight away. Roughly, within 100 or something.
Through you, Mr. Travascus.
Through the chair, no, I can't comment on the numbers, but I can say the financial impact was, it wasn't significantly one way or the other. It balanced out mostly.
Okay. Now, we're going back. A question, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, my question really relates to if we were to create a new rural residential rating zone, would that be UV or GRV?
Through you, Mr. Travascus.
Through the chair, there's examples of both in local government, so that would be detailed in the report and a recommendation or advice provided on what we think is the best option for the City of Swan.
Okay. Councillors, we get back to where we're up to, which was I'll ask, is anyone against the motion? And Councillor Catalano, you indicated you were? Okay. I'll ask again, is there anyone against the motion? Does anyone like to speak for the motion? Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd invite councillors to turn to page 368 of the report. And at 2.3.2, there's a definition. It explains where the city got the definition of predominantly rural use from. It came from some legal advice we received in November 2017. So I've got that legal advice here. Back in 2017, I was on council, but I must admit rural residential wasn't at the top of my priority list. But Ms Karen Mowat has educated me on this, and I'm reading it and following it quite closely. So the definition of UV in the Act, it says in this advice is, it quotes it, where the land is used predominantly for rural purposes. But unfortunately, as I think we all know, doesn't define predominantly, doesn't define rural. So McLeod's have very conveniently looked it up in a State Administrative Tribunal ruling, and they found a dictionary definition from the Macquarie Dictionary. And it says rural is defined as follows. So councillors, if something's not, we all know, if something's not defined in an act, you go to a dictionary. So that's what McLeod's and SAT have done. And the adjective rural is defined as follows. 1, of, relating to, or characteristic of the country, as distinguished from towns or cities, country life or country people, rustic. 2, living in the country. 3, of relating to agriculture, rural economy. So that's the definition that is used by the lawyers. So what McLeod's are saying, they're saying, we're of the opinion for determining the practical application of the definition for rating purposes that item 3, of or relating to agriculture is of greatest relevance, which we will expand on below. But unfortunately, the advice, in my view, is flawed. It's not fit for purpose because it does not discuss items 1 and 2, of relating to or characteristic of the country, country life, country people, rustic, 2, living in the country. This is exactly what those people who are on UV out there in rural residential land believe should be applied to them. They think they are rural because they're living in the country and their property is characteristic of the country. So what I'm saying, councillors, is that the legal advice on which this was founded did not make any attempt to dismiss 1 and 2 in this advice. It simply jumped straight to 3 without any explanations to why 1 or 2 wasn't relevant. So when this report is produced, I suggest we get new legal advice in which we try to get some explanation as to why number 1 and number 2 is not relevant. And because, in my view, the advice
Thank you,
is
Deputy
not
Mayor. That's
satisfactory,
Thank you.
Councillor,
So I'll now ask
others,
if
I
there's anyone
suggest that
against the motion. Just one moment. Councillor Henderson? Yep, the seconder. Councillor Howlett, is anyone against? No. And what was the extension of time?
10 seconds will do.
Thank you.
So, because the definition in the report relies upon flawed legal advice, we therefore need to review and revise the report, and that is why I'm supporting Councillor Zanino's motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll ask, is anyone against the motion? Does anyone like to speak for the motion? Thank you, Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And Madam Mayor, I'm not going to talk about what I think may be flawed legal advice because I'm not a lawyer. But Madam Mayor, continuing on from Councillor Johnson, I agree. When it's not defined, we go to the Interpretation Act. Interpretation Act then go to the dictionary. I've looked up the dictionary and I agree it's those 3 points. But as we were told at the briefing last week, and I was waiting for the CEO to get it out, the city of Swan, nothing new here, we're not country. We are not country. The giveaway should be you live in the city of Swan. The definition of country continues to go on, not a town or a city. So country, Dumbleyoung, Calabaran, Tamman, all the areas I've lived in, good pubs. Madam Mayor, living in the country. I made that point before because I did live in the country. So Madam Mayor, when you look at a dictionary definition and it's got 3 points, my limited legal knowledge of reading legislation would indicate that if 2 of the 3 are not actually relevant, you dismiss them. You put them to the side. And that came down to the number 3. So Madam Mayor, please, can we not go get more legal advice and spend more ratepayers' money on something that's already been defined? Because, Madam Mayor, if we did that every time I disagreed with one of the exec staff, our legal costs, and Councillor Henderson and myself and Councillor Miles and others who are on the audit committee, we've raised the concerns of a particular business unit, directorate, whose legal costs are way over budget. So, Madam Mayor, bringing it back, I'm actually happy. I'm not sure how Councillor Zanino got to put in that 3rd one without the notice, but it's okay. I would have moved the amendment and he would have accepted it, and so would Councillor Henderson, and it would have been done. It's good to look at a different option. Karen Mowat even said, what about a different option? We know other local governments do it. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know, but I'm going to know once I get that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. I will ask once more, is there anyone who'd like to speak against the motion? Is anyone who'd like to speak for the motion? Councillor Henderson.
Briefly, councillors, one of the things that we are elected to do is to make some decisions. Sometimes those decisions are hard, sometimes they're easy. And this is one of those very difficult ones because there will be winners and losers. And one of the things that we hate as councillors is losers, because that person's going to hate my guts because my rates went up $10 or whatever. The fact of the matter is that I'm well aware of some property owners in the Swan Valley that have shifted from UV to GRV, and their rates have dropped significantly, like $300 as an example of one of them. I'm surprised we're not being killed in the rush, because let's face it, a lot of those properties out there don't have a great big GRV return. And that's the key here. There will be a lot of people that are going to come out okay, and there's going to be some that come out with higher rates. The fact of the matter is, let's do the work. Let's come up with the answers, and let's resolve this one way or the other. We don't like to do the hard things sometimes, but that's what we're here for. Thank you.
Councillors, anyone would like to speak for or against the motion? If not, Your right to reply, Councillor Zanino.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, councillors. I'm going to keep this very brief. This is what I would say is courtesy and respect for the rural sector. They're not asking for the world. All they're asking is to be advised, to be part of what is going to happen. And the trick is, previously, if you go back to 2017, and even the motion that was put in this item, which was the officer's recommendation, was basically asking this council to approve the review. I mean, once this council has approved the review, it's useless going out and trying to have some sort of community consultation, because that's not going to be taken into account because you've already approved it. So all I'm saying is these people, I mean, I'm not saying that they all are against or they're all in favour. All they're saying is please have the courtesy and respect to involve us. Let us have some input. Now, if you want to railroad the rural sector, go ahead and do it.
Thank you, Councillor Zanino. We'll now take a vote. Those in favour? So we have Councillor Catalano, Councillor... Oh gosh, Councillor Singh. It's getting late, isn't it? Councillor Aringo, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Jones, Councillor McCulloch, Councillor Miles, Councillor Knight, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Podovnik, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Howlett, Councillor Dawn and myself. And that's 15 and carried. Thank you very much. Now, do I have a break? So, councillors, we're just a minute off 8 o'clock or 2 minutes off 8 o'clock. Do you wish to have a 10-minute break? Yes, okay. For those watching online, we're just going to have a short 10-minute recess and then we'll be back online at 8:10. To those watching at home, we've just returned and we are moving on to 14.5.4, which is the 2023-2024 annual report, withdrawn for absolute majority vote. That Council resolved to 1, accept the Audit Committee recommendation to adopt the annual financial report for the year ended 30th of June 2024, and 2, accept the annual report for the year ended 30th of June 2024, subject to design, and authorise the CEO to approve any minor changes that may be required before the document is finalised for printing. 3, approve the annual meeting of electors for 2023-24 and give public notice in accordance with the Local Government Act 1995. Does any councillor wish to debate this item? What mover? Councillor Bowman, and a seconder. Councillor Zanino, is anyone against? No, that's carried. Thank you. So we move to 14.5.5, which is fees and charges Ellenbrook Area Parking Plan, which is found on page 392, and an absolute majority is required. Proposed motion by Councillor McCulloch. If you'd like to please read out your alternate motion.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Proposed motion is that Council resolve to 1, approve the addition of the following fees and charges to the City's adopted 24-25 schedule of fees and charges for the Ellenbrook Town Centre Parking Station, number 20. A, ad hoc paid parking permit of $2.10 per hour, including GST. B, all-day parking in marked bays of $8.40, including GST. And C, a 12-month paid permit for eligible Ellenbrook business employees of $417.50, including GST. 2, give local public notice for a minimum of 7 days in accordance with the Local Government Act 1995. The reason for the motion is the 12-month paid permit for Ellenbrook business employees provides a reasonably priced parking option in line with PTA car park costs and does not impose an unfair burden on small business.
Thank you, Councillor McCulloch, and I have a seconder, Councillor Jones. Thank you. Is there anyone against? It's carried. Thank you. Okay, councillors, now we move on to 15, motions of which previous notice have been given. 15.1, Deputy Mayor Johnson, proposed amendment to City of Swan Health Local Law 2002 on page 396. Deputy Mayor Johnson, please, if you'd like to read out your notice of motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My proposed motion is that Council resolve to 1, request that the CEO report to a future meeting of Council on the feasibility and desirability of amending the City of Swan Health Local Law to provide clearer powers to manage nuisance to residential amenity caused by tobacco smoking and other smoking products. 2, the local law currently includes this section, escape of smoke, etc. 5.3.1, subject to clause 2, an owner or occupier of premises shall not cause or permit the escape of smoke, dust, offensive or foul odours, or liquid waste from the premises in such quantity or of such nature as to cause or to be a nuisance to any person. 2, subclause 1 does not apply to smoke from the chimney of a private dwelling house. 3, it is requested that the CEO reports on the feasibility of amending the wording as follows: escape of smoke, etc. 5.3.1, subject to subclause 2, an owner or occupier of premises shall not cause to permit the escape of smoke, including from a tobacco product, non-tobacco smoking product, or e-cigarette that is generating an aerosol or vapour, dust, fumes, offensive or foul odours, or liquid waste from the premises in such quantity or of such nature to cause or to be a nuisance to any person. Subclause 1 does not apply to smoke from the chimney of a private dwelling house. Reason for the motion: members of the community living in private dwellings adjacent to managed hostels, group dwellings for people in care, private psychiatric hostel and other supported accommodation may be impacted by smoke drift from outdoor smoking areas that have been established since these facilities became smoke-free. Smoke drift can be a hazard to health, and the city's local laws should be updated in line with changes to West Australian law that prevents smoking inside medical facilities and the recognition of the harm that can be caused by secondary smoking.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Howlett.
Unfortunately, over page, there's just one more bit of my reason. The city local law is currently not clear on the subject of tobacco smoke, and this report would advise if a change to the local law is feasible. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Councillor Howlett as the seconder. Is there anyone against? Do you wish to debate it? Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. Councillors, I'm sure you're all moved by the deputations on this motion that describe the impact on the health of the family who were subject to tobacco smoke drift from a group dwelling next door. Tobacco smoke is a Class 1 carcinogen, and to have tobacco smoke from many balconies and outdoor areas drifting into a family home is clearly a risk to their health and safety. The city has a duty of care under its health local law 2002 to take action to prevent the escape of smoke. So why do we need to change the local law? Why now? For at least 2 years, Siobhan Solomon and her family have been trying to get the city to take action. This is since May 2022, I believe, under local health law. Siobhan has told me the city staff do not consider smoke to include tobacco smoke and are reluctant to take action. After 2 years, I concluded the only way forward was to change the local law to include tobacco smoke within the definition of smoke. It might seem obvious, but it makes it clear. It's a big thing to change a local law. I did discuss it with the staff first. It's not an insignificant action, and I don't do it lightly. I did not expect that the local law would need to be completely replaced. So it appears that the local law has to be replaced by the end of 2026 in alignment with new legislation. It'll take until the end of 2025 at the latest to change the current local law using the current legislation. Changing the existing local law, however, is still a perfectly valid thing to do and is the most timely way to proceed. To wait until the new legislation in 2026 is too long a wait because we're dealing with an urgent matter of health and safety. The city and us have a duty of care to this family to protect them from tobacco smoke by amending the existing local law to remove any ambiguity about the meaning of smoke. So the Solomon family have been patient these last 2 years and in my view should not be disadvantaged by a change in legislation at the state government level that is beyond our and their control. My motion proposes a modest change to the existing local health law by the end of 2025, and this can be used as the basis for the replacement local law under the new legislation in 2026. To support the Solomon family and other residents with similar smoke drift problems, because there are other residents with this problem, please support my motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Hallett as the seconder.
Thank you. Councillors, we've come a long way with tobacco control and cigarette smoking over the years. I can recall school buses with ashtrays, flying international planes with ashtrays. And in fact, my first job was at the Oyster Beds restaurant, if we're talking about previous employment, as Councillor Bowman did earlier tonight, and learning to change ashtrays at the table without spilling cigarette butts all over the diners. We're now at the point of banning the sale of vapes in Western Australia because they're a known pollutant to health. We need to be proactive. Please support Deputy Mayor Johnson's motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hallett. I'll ask if there are any councillors who'd like to speak against the motion. Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, reminiscing about old times, yes, working at Dear Friends, you know, the cigars at the bar while I was trying to do dishes probably turned me off that smell forever. I hate smokers. I hate the drift going into anywhere where I am. I hate walking into the shopping centres, what it is. But Madam Mayor, I can't support this motion because yet again we're asking the CEO to do something, to look at it, for him to provide his advice. Then we're saying this is how it should be. And I can't support that. That's what it comes down to for me. If we got rid of that rest of that, I would support it. But I will not support a motion that we ask for a report and then we say, but I want you to do this or I want you to do that. That's not our role, I believe. That's the role of professional advice that give us our advice. But Madam Mayor, I probably should have started with the question, but I'll end with the question to Mr Bishop. It was asked after the deputation last week about contacting the city by the person that did the deputation. Mr Bishop, I believe, said he would look at it because he wasn't aware of it, if that was him, and because he had no knowledge of that. Thinking it was Mr. Bishop because ranges are his, but the look on his face would indicate no, and I probably should be looking that way, so I will sit down if I can get that question asked, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. I'll ask, does anyone like to speak for the motion? Or question to start?
Madam Mayor, that question was answered during the week. In short, since the first complaint was received, the officers attended to the matter. There were negotiations with the operators of the neighbouring property, and what they did was they stopped using a pergola area as a smoking area at the time, and restricted their tenants to smoke in that area. They then moved into their units, smoked on the balconies, and then there was a change of management, and people started smoking in the pergola area again. Officers again made contact with the management of that facility. At that stage, the management of the facility wasn't that keen to participate in that process, and that is when the officers confirmed in a letter that prosecution or taking action is difficult and cannot actually happen. Now, so there was action by officers taken. In fact, since last week, we've managed to have an appointment with the management. We've met with them this morning, staff met with them, and they actually confirmed that in the last year they haven't had many complaints from Mrs. Solomon. But in being on the property, it's confirmed that pergola area don't have any chairs. They can't sit there. They're not allowed to smoke there, and that currently the tenants are smoking on balconies. Now, if you look at the establishment, they've got 28 rooms. 6 of those units have got balconies bordering Mrs. Solomon's property. But there's only about, well, approximately half of the occupants are actually smoking. So we've discussed with staff today. The next step that we'll do is we'll negotiate for them to try and place their tenants so that the non-smokers be placed in those units. So the point is, prosecution or legal action is not always the answer. We can negotiate and try and get a solution. Whilst we have the difficulty of being, it's impossible to take legal action under the current local law. And that is why we propose to remedy the situation during the review of the local laws, where we will prepare a local law under the Local Government Act that addresses this matter. So I think it's quite clear from the responses we've provided in the comments in the report prior to the forum meeting and after the forum meeting, that officers were actively addressing the matter and is also looking at it during the review of the local laws.
Thank you. Councillors, is there anyone who would like to speak for the motion? Does anyone like to speak against the motion? Councillor Henderson.
Councillors, one of the reasons that I really hate smoking is because it actually gives me a bit of asthma. My business partners in the past used, one of which was a horrific chain smoker. He'd fill up a nice, beautiful pile, if you like, a pile of butts and ash, and the room stank to high heaven. And I resolved the problem by coming in one morning and picking up this crystal ashtray and heaving it against the wall and smashed it. And he got the message. So the point is that he had every right to smoke, and I had every right to complain. And it's about personal freedoms. And the government don't want to step on top of this because, frankly, they don't want to step on personal freedoms. So for us to be able to introduce a local law as staff have suggested, I can see that as being extremely problematic. Admittedly, there's less smokers around today than there used to be, and so we might get more people saying stop smoking to take away more of people's freedoms and rights, albeit that I don't like them. So when it's illegal, it is actually a legal product, and that's the key here. When you end up in court and you say, well, I'm smoking a legal product, I paid a pile of tax on that as well, it's going to find it difficult to say to someone, well, you can't do that. So I don't see this as a simple solution to a problem. What I see is negotiation as a simple solution. I negotiated my problem, albeit it was pretty solid, but I think the staff have a responsibility to spend time, work with people, and to get results so that we're not imposing bylaws that impose on freedoms of everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Does anyone like to speak for the motion? For the motion. Thank you, Councillor Catalano.
I just wanted to say that picking up someone's belonging and smashing it is actually not really the way to go. And in fact, you can end up in serious trouble doing things like that. And
okay,
yes, but you can.
Can we just continue to keep to the?
Well,
thank you, Councillor Catalano.
Well, I'm trying to address the issue here, is that you know, these people can't simply throw things at these people. They're trying to do it through the proper process and proper channels. And I don't see there's any good reason for us to stop regulation of what is in fact a nuisance. You know, that people have freedoms, yes, but people don't have freedoms to smash other people's belongings, and that is not a solution, obviously. In this case, it's probably better for us to go through.
Councillor Catalano, if you could just resume your seat for a moment, please. Councillor Henderson, what is your point of order?
6.8, relevance. It was an analogy as opposed to a fact.
Thank you. I'm not going to uphold your point of order. Councillor Catalano, if you could continue and just keep to the point of...
thank you. Well, it's just that, I mean, this council shouldn't be advocating that kind of conduct as well, in fact.
Thank you. If we could just continue.
So, as I was trying to say, what we should support is residents who are going through the proper channels to try and sort out the nuisance through local laws and regulations, which is the reasonable and best way to go about sorting out these kind of health issues. So I think we should support it. And I don't see why you would object to the CEO bringing a report to council. There may be all kinds of issues raised that we're not aware of. And it's been done by this council for all the years that I've been on council, and there's never been any mention of, oh no, we can't possibly ask the staff to do a report on something that we might not agree with. We've already had that issue raised tonight with Councillor Zanino's rate issues in the Swan Valley. That was a report to council about residential rezoning, and council supported that. So that is actually an incredibly weak argument for not supporting this motion tonight. And, you know, if you're going to oppose something, then I think the reasons should be strong, they should be sound, and they should encourage the kind of conduct that we want in our neighbourhoods.
Thank you, Councillor Catalano. I'll ask, is anyone against the motion? Does anyone? Councillor Dawn? That's against the motion. Now I'll ask, is anyone like to speak for the motion? Councillor Dawn?
Excellent. No, thanks very much for that. I support the motion, and I think there should be regulation to support smoke drift issues. But I think it's excellent that what the staff are doing with the negotiation and to make that side of the neighbouring side non-smoking. So if they can negotiate in that capacity, then I think that could be a win-win situation, definitely. Maybe it means the residents have to shift apartments, but then I think so be it. I think that's an excellent outcome. But I definitely support the motion for sure. I think there needs to be regulation around it.
Thank you, Councillor Dawn. I'll ask councillors again. Does anyone like to speak for or against the motion? If there's not, you'll write a reply.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillors, we're asking for a report here to support a law-abiding family. We've given some indications to the CEO as to what could potentially go into this amendment to the health local law, but it's up to the CEO to advise us. It's his call what to do. Now, this change would not stop people from smoking, not at all. We're not infringing on people's right to smoke. They can go and smoke somewhere else. It doesn't impact other people. This family living next door and other families, and this isn't the only location where we have this problem, I believe they have a right to freedom from smoke, freedom from having a grade 1 carcinogen wafted into their homes. It's not about personal freedoms. It's not infringing on anybody's personal freedom, but like I say, the Solomon family do have a right to a freedom from class 1 carcinogens. Councillors, this change in the local law would strengthen the city when it was negotiating. I do agree that you negotiate. The best way to negotiate is to say, look, here's the law. It classifies tobacco smoke as smoke. So therefore, we'd like you, people who are managing this facility, to reorganise it so that the smoke is not being blown into neighbouring properties. So you negotiate from a position of strength, but you go about it in a pleasant manner, as I know that Mr. van der Linde and his team have done. As I heard it, there are 28 rooms that are potentially being used for smoking. I guess the other point here is, why have a local law if you can't enforce it? It must have been, if it's a law, it's enforceable. One of the things we heard from Ms. Solomon, we heard tonight was, and from Mr. van der Linde, there's been a regular changeover of management and residents, so you can negotiate with one group, but if you don't have an enforceable law, the next manager or the next residents may not be so amenable. So we're relying on goodwill, but if you're negotiating with a clear law that defines smokers, including tobacco smoke, you're in a strong position to say, please don't smoke on those balconies, go smoke somewhere else, establish a smoking room somewhere in the facility. Just emphasise again, the purpose is to request the CEO to report on changing the law. This does not actually change the law. The process would be, the CEO would make the recommendation, it would come back to council, and if the CEO thought that the law could be feasibly changed, then it would go out to public consultation. Then it would be approved by council when it came back, and then it would have to be gazetted and approved by, I believe there's a committee that reviews subsidiary legislation of this nature. So this is not a, if you pass this motion tonight, councillors, the health law isn't instantly changed. It sets off a process, and I think it's something that everybody in our community would support. So
thank you.
You heard the Solomon family. Please vote for this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll ask those in favour. Councillor Catalano, Councillor Singh, Councillor Miles, Councillor Knight, Councillor Dawn, Councillor Brodovnik, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Howlett, and myself. 9, and those against. Councillor Bowman, Councillor Jones, Councillor McCulloch, and Councillor Zanino and Councillor Henderson. So the motion is carried 9-4. 9-5. Thank you very much. And councillors, move on to 15.2, Deputy Mayor Johnson, Verge mowing policy, page 398. Deputy Mayor Johnson, please, if you'd like to read out your notice of motion. No, it's
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
9.5. I had 9. Yep, 9.5. I had 9.5. Councillor, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. My proposed motion is that Council resolve to 1, request the CEO to prepare a verge mowing policy for a future meeting of Council. And the reason for my motion is that councils have received a large number of questions about verge mowing this season. Although there is a management practice in place for mowing, there is not a verge mowing policy for public reference. A verge mowing policy would establish a service level that would meet community expectations and enable the budget for verge mowing to be estimated.
Thank you. I'll ask if you have a seconder. Councillor Catalano. And is there anyone against?
Question?
Question?
When you say verge mowing policy, are you talking about the entire city of Swan, or are you just talking about the urban areas?
That would be something that would be defined by the CEO. So my motion is purposefully abstract and leaves it to the CEO to define a verge mowing policy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll have to say I'm against because there's not enough detail here at this early stage.
Thank you. Okay, Deputy Mayor. Yep, so Councillor Catalano as the seconder. Oh, I did call you Deputy Mayor.
No, I didn't. I thought someone else was going to ask a question. Councillors, my motion proposes that we ask the CEO to prepare a verge mowing policy. And it's very high level, and I'm leaving it entirely to the CEO and the staff to determine what should be in it. But why do we need a verge mowing policy? Verge mowing accounts for a significant number of requests from the community to councillors, at least in my experience, through emails or phone calls. And if you drive around the residential streets of, say, Midland in August, September, October, and even now, you'll see unkempt verges. This annoys many members of our community and leads to complaints and a negative view of the city, primarily because they believe that the city should be mowing those verges, but there is no policy out there for us to determine what actually should be happening. The situation is that no formal expectation of the maintenance of city verges has been established. No formal expectation. The community don't know what to expect. Staff do not have a clear service level for maintenance of verges. And the result is dissatisfaction by community, staff not meeting community expectations despite working very hard, and councillors getting caught in the middle. A city verge mowing policy would solve this problem by providing a standard for verge maintenance that community, staff and councillors could point to as a service standard that can easily be implemented and adopted. Why don't we already have a verge mowing policy? Well, until February 2010, we did have a Shire of Swan policy for verge maintenance in urban areas. Other councils today do have verge policy defining mowing. For instance, Stirling has a verge treatment policy that describes the extent of verge mowing done by the city. The Shire of 2J, it's always a good example, does have a verge maintenance policy. Councillors, in preparation for this motion, I've asked some questions in writing which you may have read to understand what the city offered and what capacity we have. The city has 3,350 kilometres of verge. The city undertakes to cut unmaintained verges twice a year and aims to cut 3 times a year. The city also says it only maintains verges in limited circumstances, which I find personally difficult to reconcile with 2 to 3 times a week, but 2 or 3 times a year. But that's why we need a policy. To maintain our verges to these service levels, we have 37 staff, 17 ride-on mowers and 4 tractor mowers. So that's 37 staff to operate 21 mowers. We also spend about 40k a month on mowing contractors. In the 2024-25 Parks and Reserves maintenance budget, sorry, I've lost my way, it says the city has 298 hectares of verge to maintain and they're mowed 3 times a year. A published City of Swan verge mowing policy would make clear the service level we are providing to our ratepayers, would enable the city to accurately budget for the service, and would improve community satisfaction. You'll notice my motion to state.
Thank you very
was-
much, Deputy Mayor. That's your 3 minutes.
I've got 3 more sentences. If I can carry on. I move I get 3 more sentences.
Thank you. Anyone against? No.
My motion does not state what should be in the policy. That's for the CEO to draft and to advertise for submissions from the public, make amendments and then bring to council for endorsement. A verge mowing policy will help set community expectations about verge mowing service levels, improve community satisfaction and make for a more accurate budget process. A verge mowing policy will also reduce the number of emails and phone calls councillors get each spring and will enable councillors and staff to effectively answer community enquiries about verge mowing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Catalano.
I'll reserve my right to speak, thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone like to speak against the motion? Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, first of all, question, a verge mowing policy, is that an operational matter or is that a council matter?
Through you, Mr. CEO.
Well, again, it would depend on what the policy requirement is. The city has detailed operational guidelines which cover all of that. We publish those and on the website on the standards. But on a policy, it depends what you want in the policy.
And Madam Mayor, would this motion, which requests the CEO prepare a verge mowing policy for a future meeting of council, would the policy, because I don't think it'd be in the policy, but would there be an attached report that would say what the cost would be to implement that policy and also the financial implications of that policy to the City of Swan ratepayers?
Perhaps through you, Mr. Coaten.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. That is the point that staff did make in the officer comment, that a policy won't, you can have a policy, but you still have to set the budget. So all the information that is needed, if council wish to improve the level of service, it's set through council's adopted asset management strategy and the strategic community plan. All of those, if there's issues with the service levels, those sort of things can be addressed through the annual business planning and budgeting process. So a policy, I would strongly suggest, wouldn't include information on the budget, because then that constrains council to a fixed budget that has to be included. So that would, I would suggest that would certainly be something that wouldn't be in the budget, the policy.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, I'd love to see a policy. I'd love to see a policy on verge mowing that does my verges 12 times a year, preferably before I do it, so then I don't have to do it. Madam Mayor, I'd like to see that verge policy that would actually say it's going to be cut to 5 centimetres. Madam Mayor, I'd like to see the verge policy that actually says we'll retick my verge. I'd like to see the verge policy that actually says they'll rake up the lawn afterwards. Until, Madam Mayor, I find out that my rates are going to triple. It's a bit like my holiday that's coming up soon. Going on a boat cruise with the kids, bad idea. Want the drinks package? You want the extra leg room on the plane? Do you want to go into the Virgin Lounge? Yes, yes, yes. By the way, this is how much it's going to cost. So, Madam Mayor, councillors, policies are great, but when we have a policy that says we're going to do this or that, or when we go out to the community and say, do you want a policy that you're going to have your verges reticked, mowed 12 times a year, maybe even 13, so it's every 4 weeks, everyone, I think, is going to say yes. Because after all, we're all time poor, and I'd love Mr. Coaten and his staff to do my verge until we find out how much it's going to cost. And unless we're going to be upfront from the start, why? When we look at the issues, some verges in the City of Swan are shocking and some are amazing. The ones that are shocking are usually the Snapsol Sentinels, if I got it right. Thanks, Councillor Miles. I was looking at you for confirmation there. We get complaints from neighbours. Mr. Coaten and his team, well, not necessarily Mr. Coaten, but he gets staff down below, will then go out and address that. but sometimes it's not the next day because we've got other operational matters. But we can fix that in a policy. But that policy will cost money. Mr. Coaten, the policy says I've complained about my Verge. The policy says you'll be out here in 48 hours. Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Coaten. But what is it going to cost our ratepayers? We need to be responsible. I have heard too many times around this table, yes, 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 and it comes at an expense. Who pays for that? And this is why I cannot support this policy until I see those facts. Until I see that. And look at what the officers have actually put in their comments. I think they agree with me, albeit said a little bit differently. But please, councillors, if you want to support a policy, please, let's request that it's 12 months a year, 12 times a year. Let's request that I can ring Mr. Coaten up and complain and I'll be 48 hours and it'll fix. And please, please, can we make sure it's mowed at 5 centimetres and the leaves are raked up, please?
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. Now I'll ask, is anyone else who'd like to speak for the motion? Yes. Councillor Catalano.
You know, it's the single biggest issue in terms of complaints that I get. And residents and ratepayers have an expectation, they really do have an expectation, that the verges will look tidy. And that's just not only their residential verges, by the way, but that's swathes of commercial verges. And I mean, I don't know if you went up to Brabham this year, but my God, verges that were on islands, traffic islands, verges that were along the commercial centre. I mean, they were like, is that 1.5 metres high in oak grass? And it was absolutely everywhere, and there was nothing getting done about it. Every year I have the same from Dayton. Look, you know, people need to know where they stand. They really do. I mean, and I want to make a point here that people should also be allowed to opt out of their verge being mowed or being dealt with, either trees pruned or because there are people out there that want to maintain their verges themselves. And that's also come up as an issue because somebody wants to maintain their verges and then for some reason that's refused. So I think that we need to be really sensible about this and create a policy so that ratepayers know where they stand and they also get value for money. Now, it's ludicrous to suggest that your verge is going to be mowed every 2 weeks because we know that verges don't grow in the summer. So we're talking about the winter months, we're talking about the later winter months. This is Perth. It's not going to be for a huge amount of the year. But when it is done, it needs to get done. And it doesn't need to get done when the oak grass has grown to 1.5 metres high. It needs to be done on a regular basis. And that is not just to, you know, satisfy ratepayers' expectations. It's also there to give them a sense of well-being about their communities, to make them feel proud that they belong to that community. And that, at the end of the day, actually feeds back to the city in the reward of people taking care. If they see that the city takes care of its verges, then they are more likely to contribute to the maintenance and the care of their suburb. When the grass is that high, they don't feel inclined to do so, and they complain.
Would anyone else like to speak for the motion? Sorry, against the motion. Councillor Henderson.
So I get complaints in Caversham about the verges, and I report those to staff. In an operational manner, they go through and they clean up the area as they normally would. and I come back to Councillor Bowman's point, is this an operational matter? Well, it certainly is, because we set a budget for how much we're going to spend on this. I want to talk about another little issue. Well, not exactly little, it's huge. You know how many kilometres of rural verges we've got? Hundreds. Hundreds of kilometres. No, I'm talking about the verges in the rural areas. So the point is, those residents don't have any streetlights, they don't have any reticulation, they don't get their verges mown by the city because we simply cannot possibly afford it. There are occasions where we might resolve some fire issues. Certainly the fire brigades do some of that. But the point is, where is the equity? If we're not going to do the rural areas, they pay rates too. We're not going to do the rural areas, which I'm certain is going to be the response of this. Why should we be doing the urban areas? So that I can think back to when we did our budget. There were councillors that voted for no rate increase. Well, even with a rate increase, we're still struggling to be able to get enough contractors to do the mowing and enough money to do what we need to do. So I come back to the point that rates would have to rise very significantly if we gave an expectation, and that's the key, an expectation in a policy that we'll send someone out to mow someone's lawn for them or their verge. Now, some people do take great pride in their verges. Yeah, fantastic. I think we need to be clear that we are trying to keep our rates as low as practical, and that we can allow our ratepayers to do their work. Bottom line is, you can't have your cake and eat it too, I think, and that's the key. And more importantly, what's the agenda here in the urban areas? Are we here to pander to some people who just don't want to do it, or are we going to say, okay, encourage them to do it? What methods do we utilise? How do we go out and market that? So that's what I think we should be looking at, rather than this approach, which impinges, in my view, on operational matters based around our budget.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillors, does anyone like to speak for the motion? Does anyone like to speak against the motion? Councillors will now put that to the vote. Oh, sorry, you're right to reply. Don't worry.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Quite a few interesting points to make here. First of all, councillors, this is a request for a policy. Policy is clearly within the remit of council. All of the functions of the city are within the remit of council. We set policy to determine those, and the outcome is operation. So this is not us delving into operation. There's been a lot of talk by Councillor Henderson and Councillor Bowman about what expectations is this going to set. At the moment, there are no expectations. People complain because I think many of them think that the city is going to be mowing their lawn, sort of on a regular basis, or their verge on a regular basis. But that is not the idea of this motion. The idea of this motion is to have a publicly stated policy on verge mowing, which is not uncommon. As I've mentioned, 2J has one, and the 2J1 does not include monthly mowing, does not include reticulation. And you almost think Councillor Bowman is expecting that we're going to be mowing his lawn and emptying his bin for him. Well, not in the city of Swan. Might be going in 2J, but not here. Look, equity would be included in the policy. And as for councillors' concern about costs, right now we're mowing, and we're spending 37 staff. We've got 21 mowers, and we're spending $40,000 a month on contractors. But we don't have a clear understanding of exactly what is being done or exactly what our community can expect, and that's what they want. My expectation would be that the CEO would prepare a draft policy based upon what we're doing at the moment, which I understand is will be done 2 times a year, aim to do it 3 times a year. It's targeted at unkempt verges. I'm sure the CEO will produce an option that does not increase costs, and he may produce other options that do increase costs, maybe options that reduce costs. It's really down to the CEO. But the point here is that we've got a public statement. We know what the service level is. A very interesting point from Councillor Bowman. He said he cannot support it until he sees it. Well, the whole purpose of the motion, Councillor, is to ask the CEO to create it so you can see it. So if you don't vote for this, you won't ever see it. So I think you're putting the cart before the horse there. As I said earlier, this is about policy. It's the function of council, and it is the most complained about function of our city. I received 2 complaints today. I couldn't believe it. I didn't trigger them by asking anybody any questions. We've even had substantial essays sent to us on, look at all these verges in Ellenbrook that need to be mowed. What are you doing about that? This is about getting the confidence of our community by creating a clearly defined policy with service
Councillors will now
levels.
put that to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Catalano, Councillor Singh, Councillor Miles, Councillor Knight, Councillor Brodovnik, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Howlett and Councillor Dawn. And those against? Councillor Bowman, Councillor Jones, Councillor McCulloch, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Henderson and myself. That's carried 8-6. Okay. Councillors, we move on to the confidential item. This is part 16, confidential reports, and I'll need a motion to go behind closed doors. Do I have a mover? Councillor Bowman. And a seconder, Councillor Jones. Thank you. Is there anyone against? Nope, so it's carried. And I was just going to say. That work? Okay. Should let them know generally before we cut them off. Okay. those watching online, we've just come back from a confidential item, and we'd just like to confirm that item, which was 16.1, Citizen of the Year for 2025, a confidential item, and that Council resolves to endorse the winners as approved by Council for each category of the Community Citizens of the Year 2024, Community Citizen of the Year, Senior Community Citizen of the Year, Young Community Citizen of the Year, Active Citizenship Award, and as per the email sent to all councillors on Monday the 9th of December 2024 at 11:15 a.m. by the Executive Director. There, thank you. Oh, Place and Stakeholder Executive. Now, I'd just like to also move to 17. To instruct the CEO to keep the details of the winners confidential until such time as the awards are conferred on Australia Day, 26th of January 2025. Item 17, notice of motions for consideration at the following meeting if given during the meeting. The deadline for submissions is 5 p.m. on Tuesday the 21st of January 2025. And before we leave tonight, I would just like to thank all councillors and staff for all their hard work throughout the year. And I'd also like to wish the community of Swan all the very best for a very safe holiday season. And that concludes tonight's meeting. And I hereby close the meeting at 9:10 p.m. Good evening.